Thank you all for joining tonight. We'll give it just a couple more seconds as everyone gets logged in and get started here. Okay. We have quite a bit that we're going to cover tonight, so we'll go ahead and get started. We'll do quick introductions. We do have our broker partner, Willis Towers Watson, on with us as well. I'll let them introduce themselves, but to start us off, I am Alyssa Orth. I'm our Risk and Compliance Associate here at USRowing. Pass
My
it to
name is
Tom.
Tom Rooks. I'm the chief of sport at USRowing. I've been here 4 years, and I get to do all the fun domestic operations stuff.
My name is Emily Goldsmith, and I am our safeguarding associate, so I get to work with Tom and Alyssa.
Is that it on the US rowing side? If it is, I'll introduce myself.
Yep, just us three.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. I can only see one screen at a time, so I'm not sure. Hello. Good evening. Good afternoon. My name is Scott Kessler. I'm with Willis Towers Watson. I've been with the organization for 24 years and have been a member of the sports and entertainment vertical for a number of years now, focusing on both professional, youth, amateur sports, and national governing bodies. So that's an area of practice that we have within the organization.
And my name is Leah Post. I'm a client advocate at Willis Towers Watson. I work on the sports and entertainment team alongside Scott, working with all kinds of risks relating to sports, like you said, national governing bodies. I've been in the industry for 11 years and enjoy working with you all. So it's nice to be here tonight.
All right, thank you guys. First thing I wanted to touch on is that we are implementing a member health benefit. Unfortunately, it's not going to be the topic of tonight's webinar, so just wanted to make that clear at the beginning that there will be more information on this coming soon, so be on the lookout in your emails or on our website in the coming weeks. We are expecting probably early January for that webinar, but we are excited to get that going. All right, diving into this coverage of the Willis Towers Watson policy, we're looking at the pricing for 25 to 26 first. I just wanted to put that chart up here so that you could see the changes that we are experiencing. The one thing to note for small clubs is that we did increase this to 60. It was previously 50. So I just want to mention that as a change going into the next year, as some teams that are close to that cusp might be impacted by that. And then for the purposes of tonight's call, like we're talking solely for plus teams. We're not really diving into standard members or requirements for them. So with that, I'm going to pass this slide off to WTW to kind of explain some of those changes that we're seeing and just kind of the trends in the market that we're in. So I'll pass it off to you guys.
Yeah. Thank you, Alyssa. Unfortunately, probably one of the most impactful portions of the insurance marketplace right now is casualty insurance in general liability, automobile, and umbrella and excess liability lines of business are starting to see a lot of pressure on rate. It's a bit of a perfect storm in that sports and entertainment as a subset of that space and in this specific industry is really seeing a lot of pressure on rate by the carriers. We've given you some general parameters that we're seeing on our accounts, on renewals in the marketplace. From a general liability perspective, we're pretty much starting at least a +5 to +15 conversation when we're talking about rate. Automobile liability has been a market loser in the industry for 20 years now, and for all the reasons you would think: distracted driver, the cost of a bumper today versus the cost of a bumper 15 years ago. So we continue to see pressure on rate there. And again, umbrella and excess are seeing significant pressure. And what's driving that are a number of things. I'll lump it in with social inflation in general, but specifically in our space, traumatic brain injury, more importantly, and unfortunately, sexual abuse and molestation claims, which have a long tail. There's a lag between when those get reported and when they come out in public and are reported to the carriers. So we're still seeing a lot of pressure because of the cost of those claims and what the carriers are starting to feel when these claims are coming out. Liquor liability, participant liability are all being heavily scrutinized right now because of the exposures associated with them. And because we're seeing that it's becoming impactful on the size of the verdicts, we have seen other issues that we're facing. We mentioned AstroWorld. AstroWorld alone, while not public, was at least $1 billion event. And the market in the aggregate on that program that we're covering different aspects of AstroWorld has actually had an impact on our market because of the number of carriers that were involved in that. There continues to be a lot of underwriting scrutiny around higher non-owned auto liability. 10 years ago, it was coverage that was just given and provided, and there was no real thought around it. But because of the increase in frequency and severity of claims around higher non-owned auto liability, we're starting to see pressure on that coverage, and the carriers are taking rate as a result of that. You see the word nuclear verdicts. A nuclear verdict is a verdict that's $10 million of liability, a payment in a verdict. We now have a thermonuclear, which means if it gets, which nuclear is 10 million, thermonuclear is 20 million. So 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I really didn't see umbrella claims all that much. Now we're seeing 10, 20, $30 million verdicts, $100 million verdicts that are really driving how the carriers are looking at pricing their products, their coverages, and actually reducing capacity. We typically 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, would see a carrier put out 25 million in limits. And now we're seeing 5 million, maybe a $10 million tranche that a carrier is willing to put out at a time. So it's taking us more carriers to put together the limits that are required to insure our clients and to protect their assets. So all of that is to say that the insurance marketplace for liability in particular is very challenging. And for sports and entertainment in particular, it's even more challenging. Some of that's driven by supply and demand. There aren't as many carriers that are willing to insure your type of exposure, a national governing body. If you were a Pepsi bottler or a widget manufacturer, there would be a lot of markets that would be interested in the business, but there are only a few. Because of that, it's supply and demand, and they're driving rate as a result of that.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for kind of explaining.
Not to give you the doom and gloom, but that is what is going on.
No, it's good to know. There's just a lot of factors that go into it, and when looking at our price structuring, just last year we had a couple different organizational tiers that decreased in price, and unfortunately that's not the case for this year. But just because of all those things that you touched on, that it can vary. So.
Yeah, it can. We look at that very seriously every year, as you know, Alyssa and Tom, when we go into the renewal process to try to look at what's in the marketplace, where we're headed, to try to give you a sense for where we think we're going to land, and then work really hard to try to drive the best result we can each and every year.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we will keep moving along, but on this slide, I am putting a graphic of our limits. This is pulled directly from a PDF of an outline of coverage that's also on our website. So you can view that at any time, but just wanted to put a snapshot of it up here that when you are a Plus member, these are the coverages you're getting. This is the coverage with the per occurrence and aggregate limits. The one thing I wanted to note is with these coverages, there is no deductible. So if you have a general liability claim, your club's not going to be responsible for a deductible or anything like that. We get that asked semi-frequently, so I just wanted to make that clear here. There is a deductible on the hired auto physical damage, but we'll touch on that in the next slide. The only other thing I wanted to include here with these coverages, someone had asked if Coastal rowing was, separate or included. And it's really just considered a rowing activity. It's a discipline of our sport. So same as indoor rowing, flat water, it's all included in this coverage that we're talking on tonight. All right. To dive a little bit deeper in the auto coverages, we do get quite a few questions around this, so just wanted to provide maybe some clarity. When you have the hired auto liability, what that is primary insurance coverage for any autos that are rented on behalf of the rowing club. So that means when you're renting a vehicle for club purposes, you're at the enterprise counter, you can decline the coverage as this policy is acting as primary liability. Now, to differentiate the non-owned liability, that is going to be in excess coverage. So if a member parent is driving their own vehicle for club purposes, that person's personal auto liability is primary. If something were to happen, their insurance is going to respond first. If all of those limits were exhausted, then our policy would come into play. So that's kind of the difference between the hired auto and the non-owned liability. The add-on of hired auto physical damage is included on the member portal if you are interested in it. It's one that you add on directly within our system. You pay the premium to US Rowing because it's on this policy. So not all clubs may rent vehicles. You don't have to purchase it, but it is a up to $125,000 limit on that, and it does include a $1,000 deductible. So if something were to happen, you might be responsible for that before the claim would go through. Then speaking of the rented vehicles and trailering, we get quite a few questions around that in tow vehicles, but to think about it simply, the liability of the tow vehicle is what's applicable to the trailer. So if you are towing with a rented vehicle and you're using this hired auto liability, that is what's applicable to the trailer. It's not physical damage. Like we don't have property or equipment coverage in this for the trailer itself. Those would be separate policies. But just keeping in mind that whatever's pulling the trailer, that liability is also being applied to the trailer that it is towing. So I know that can get confusing, but happy to answer questions as they come with your own, unique circumstances or vehicles and club needs.
Alyssa, we have
Yep.
one question for auto coverage, and it says for hired auto, is that for passenger vehicles only? What about trucks for towing? So I think you answered it.
Yep. So it's going to be any, vehicle that's being rented on behalf of the club. And typically those rental agreements are under the club itself, under that entity. So yes, that's where that policy is in effect.
Awesome, thank you.
And Scott might be able to word this better, but the thing I try to remind people, because this comes up at least once a year, is our insurance program isn't like bonus coverage, right? If you don't decline the insurance of a rental vehicle, then that insurance is going to go first.
First, yeah. If you
Yep.
decline it, then it becomes primary if you're renting the vehicle. Yep.
Mhm. Good point. On this slide, I wanted to touch on some of the sponsored rowing activities as a definition utilized in our policy. This slide is just a couple items I pulled from that to emphasize things that we get questions on the most. But it's not the full definition, as there are some exclusions and things like that that would be listed as sponsored rowing activities or not. But essentially, your member premises, your club operations, that's going to be anything rowing operations, workouts, and things that your club is hosting or putting on. Coaching events, office and admin operations, and then special events I put an asterisk by just because it is kind of subject to. We ask that you would let us know if something's being hosted. There are exclusions to it, so that's why I put an asterisk, is that I didn't list every single exclusion as it's a little bit lengthy. But those, generally speaking, other events that your club would be hosting is going to be included in the policy. Um, Things that it does not cover. Tom, do you want to
Yeah,
jump in on
happy
anything?
to. Yeah, so our coverage is based on rowing. So generally, the further you get from that, the less we're going to be covering. So, for example, if we have a regatta and we decide to have a powerboat drag race, that would not be covered, right? So essentially, we face backwards and we use human power. That's the pretty much the easiest way to sort of think about that. Non-sanctioned activities fall into the same category. That's a question we get quite a bit. Again, we know at a US rowing registered sanctioned event what the safety standards and principles are going to be, what rules of rowing are going to be in place, or which ones are going to be waived. We know that we'll be using US rowing referees to ensure the safety and fairness of the event, and that's why our insurance travels with a sanctioned event, but not with a non-sanctioned event. Rental of club premises to others. So we have a lot of beautiful, beautiful boathouses out there, and it's a great way to make money renting out for weddings and things of that nature. But again, if it's not part of your club's rowing activities, then it is not going to be covered by our insurance program. Private coaching. So this is one we get a lot of questions about as well. If you are coaching privately under the auspices of your member organization, then you're covered because it's a rowing activity that your member organization has decided to have. Much like if two masters rowers go out following all the safety guidelines of your club. In that case, then private coaching would be covered. But if you are saying, I'm simply a member of US Rowing completely on my own, not connected to any organization, and I'm going to do private coaching, that is not a rowing activity of an organization, which that's who we insure, the member organizations. Um, Catering of events for others, I think, that's another one that falls sort of under the weddings and other things. If you're using the boathouse to monetize something for someone else, they're bringing other people, especially, we start talking about like um, celebrations with alcohol and things of that nature. And these are not members of US Rowing. That's not an insured event. I saw a question come in on the coaching launches. The coaching launch operation is part of your member organization activities. And we very much support that. And we do get claims that involve safety launches. So that's a really good question. The only reminder I put out there is somebody who obsesses about safety is just make sure you're following all your local, state, and federal safety guidelines, right? I mean, our insurance is there for you, but you know, often in rowing we forget that I still have to comply with the state of New Jersey boating license requirement or whatever standards apply to where I'm at. Fundraisers held at the club. Scott, you could probably divvy that out a little more cleanly than me or Leah, but generally, again, if it's a club sponsored activity, there's a reason there's asterisk on it. We want to know about it, but there's some activities that fall into that are fine, and then others that could be too much. Alyssa, you kind of covered that, but if somebody wants to go further, that'd be great.
No, you kind of hit the nail on the head, Tom. We'd like to know what it is before you have the event so we can run it by the underwriter and get approval. There are some that they're not going to have a problem with, but if it's
Yeah.
just kind of think about it. If it's something that sounds like there's a lot of exposure there, we need to know about it and see if we can get it approved or not.
Yeah, it might seem absurd, but if you're breaking the ice to do a polar bear plunge as a fundraiser for your community, we really need to know about that, right? Which is
Right.
quite a bit different than having, a gala spaghetti dinner in your own boathouse with your members to raise funds. Those are different
Correct.
types of activities. So
Very
that's
different.
why you want to let
Very
us
different.
know. I
Yeah.
think we also, before we go too far, had a good question about trailering. I don't know if we're answering that in the chat from New Orleans,
What is that
or
one?
about rentals and what happens if you rent a vehicle from a parent, I think it was. Was that
Uh,
answered?
okay. I believe in the policy, and Leah, you might be able to attest to it too. There's language on loaned vehicles, or if there is like a real rental agreement. Would that be considered a loaned vehicle in that case?
Yeah, so it really needs to be a true third party. So if it's another parent or another member, of the organization, then no, right? So it has to be a true third party, and we look for a contract. So was there a quote for the rental contract agreement? That's what they're looking for with the hired auto.
Mhm. All right. Was there any other questions we want to touch on right now or keep going? Emily?
There's a couple in the Q&A, and I can work from the top, or we can go ahead and like keep moving and answer them at the end.
Okay, we'll keep moving and kind of try to circle back to some of them just in case they get covered later on. All right. I wanted to touch on sanctioned events. You'll see on the chart that really nothing's changing going into 2026. It remains free sanctioning if you're utilizing Regatta Central. We aren't making any changes to the sizes of the events and the tiers that are applicable to it. The requirements aren't changing either. If you're putting in an application, you'll see that it's pretty much the same. We encourage teams to utilize the LOC checklist, which is sent out after your event is approved or submitted. This is just kind of a helpful guide in pre-planning for safeguarding measures on water, on land, working with the chief referee. It's a good resource for pre-event and post-event just to make sure that you're hitting all of those measures. And then, of course, coverage for the event and your referees and all of that remains the same and included when you are sanctioning.
Something I'd like to cover with that too is this for me last year was probably the most important thing we did to encourage growth of our sport, right? So we charge, an appropriate amount for insurance historically for events for what we are covering. But we feel like because there have been so many great efforts, and a lot of the people I see on this webinar are the ones responsible for that, because of the efforts and the reduced incidents we've had specifically at regattas, we felt it was really important to fight to keep this at zero. We're all just one or two incidents away from where that can't be the case, but to go into 2026, second year in a row that we are not charging for the insuring of regattas is a pretty critical thing for me. And I hope we can continue it, because we saw a lot more regattas last year that sanctioned and that popped up, because I think lowering that barrier makes it easier to get into hosting regattas, which in turn makes it cheaper to participate in the sport overall. So that's a long-winded way of saying thanks.
Absolutely. On this slide, I wanted to touch on a couple frequently asked questions. We get them enough that I figured it'd be worth it to go over them here. Adding on other insurance, yes, as we talked earlier, the hired auto physical damage is the only one that can be added on to this policy. If you're interested in other coverages like D&O, crime, or equipment, things like that, there is a place in the member portal that you can opt into getting information on that. You're not going to get, policy, or USRowing's not going to be able to answer any questions or set anything up for you, but it'll connect you with assured partners to discuss a policy based on your club's unique needs. The question of international coverage in racing, the short answer is that there can be coverage. We just ask that teams notify us when they're going. We know that there's a lot of events in Canada that teams will go up to. So we ask that you tell us what event you're attending, the dates of travel and competition, and who's attending. That information is relayed over to the carrier. And if something were to raise any red flags or have any concern, then we would be in follow-up with you guys regarding that.
And you'll see on that topic as well that most international regattas will also have a requirement that you be in good standing with your governing body. And that's a way of all of us, being able to have reciprocity should somebody want to come here and participate, that we know that they're following, anti-doping standards, code of conduct standards. Almost every country we talk to that has a rowing NGB has vastly more intrusive safeguarding standards than we do. And so that being a member in good standing with your governing body is how we can have reciprocity for national participation.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to touch on the Learn to Row participants. We get quite a few questions on this, and 3 days is really the number that but those participants are getting coverage from this policy. They are required to sign the USRowing waiver or the paper waiver, as many people reference it, but they're to sign that, and they're receiving the coverage you have from WTW for up to 3 days. Anything beyond that does require membership. We implemented a Learn to Row membership this year because of that, just a lower cost 60-day membership that those individuals can utilize to either do a longer Learn to Row program or just try the sport for a couple months before deciding to join. Um, we don't include Learn to Row members as towards your roster count. Um, we want them to be able to, use that time to decide. And we know that there's teams that, teeter on that cusp of being into the next tier. So for that reason, those members do not count towards it. But if they were to join as a basic or champ or, year-round member after that is when they would be counted towards your roster. And then the last question, we kind of touched on it already. So basically, if you're hosting a special event or fundraiser, we just ask that you notify us, and we go from there just to make sure that it would be a covered event and covered with our carrier. All right, here I wanted to talk through some of the individual coverages. We have basically two categories of membership, basic and champ. But I did include a third, which is supporter. And the reason it's kind of in its own category is that it is not eligible for on-water activities. That membership tier is exactly what it sounds like. It was intended for board members, administrators, parents, chaperones that, they are involved with the club as a supporter member. They have access to Safe Sport. They can take a background check through the portal, but they are not rowers themselves. No on-water activities. Then the ones that you all are probably very familiar with would be our basic and champ. The coverage that a basic member is getting is stemming from the organization that they belong to. So, and that's true if they are a standard organization or plus organization. As a basic member, you're kind of receiving that coverage from the organizational standpoint. It's common too that a member may have multiple affiliations. So if they're competing in the spring under one org, in the fall under another, it's always true that they're just utilizing the club that they're representing. The championship tiers, I have a couple listed there, and a couple unique things about it. It does carry its own standalone general liability when competing. So all organizations are required to have membership, and they're vetted for proper insurance minimums when they're competing in sanctioned events. And so if someone is detached from a club, they're competing unaffiliated, a champ member is able to carry this coverage kind of standalone when they're not coming from an organization or representing an organization at a regatta. The other unique component to the champ members is the accidental medical coverage. It is in excess, so if someone has primary health care, that's going to be applied first, but then something like this can be applied after that. There is a $250 deductible on that sometimes can be satisfied by the primary health plan payments or patient payments already. A couple of things to note though, the benefit period is 1 year. So a member can't come and say something happened 5 years ago and now they're looking to utilize this coverage. It wouldn't apply there. It does have the $25,000 limit. And the last thing I'll note is that it is crucial that the individual be a champ member at the time of the incident. So unfortunately, if someone either let their membership lapse or they were opting into basic, there is a chance that that coverage just wouldn't be applicable because they weren't a champ member at the time. So we've seen that happen, unfortunately, but we've also seen it play out where it's extremely helpful for families. So if you think that you might be ever interested in that, it might be just worth being a champ member. But otherwise, those are the primary categories of our individual memberships. All right, here I just wanted to quickly go through how to make a claim. So when something does happen, this QR code is going to link you to the USRowing safety report form. It's kind of lengthy, but if you wanted to check out the kind of questions that we're asking, feel free to pull that up. But essentially, it's going to be step one. If something does happen and you need to pursue a claim, that's going to be the first thing that we're going to look to as to what happened. And we really can't have a lot more conversations or even go to WTW until that step one has been submitted to us. The remaining steps kind of are self-explanatory. They play out. Other parties get involved, adjusters as needed, and we all kind of work together to see the claim out until it's resolved.
Just want to cover here as well that that is the same location you can go and let us know about an incident report, whether or not you think there's an insurance claim in the offing, right?
Mm.
So we have a lot of things that happen. Lately Masters quads have been adventurous in their steering, right? We have, and when something happens, when there's a collision, when there's a problem, when there's something you think that the sport could learn from so we could mitigate future risk, let us know. Also, sometimes at the moment of an incident, it's not obvious it's going to be an insurance claim yet. And then we find out 2 months later, somebody did go to the hospital and it's not working out. And then we have liability issues. So the earlier we're made aware of things, the easier it is to anticipate the needs and any potential liability there and how we can best support you. So,
Yeah, that's a good point. I should have said that it is also just for record keeping. Like it doesn't have to be something occurred. It could be a near miss, a close call, just something that happened, and it gives us a better gauge of what is happening out there, and if anything needs to be implemented and changed on our end. I should also note that this is the exact form you would use for an auto incident as well. Sometimes those claims start to carry out like with the rental companies before they ever cross our desk. So it is the starting point for that too, to kind of get us and Willis Towers Watson involved to get that moving.
the last thing to say on the claims process there is you can file an incident report anonymously, and that's fine because sometimes you just witness something, but you're not necessarily involved, like you're at a regatta. But you cannot file an insurance claim anonymously, right? It'd be really hard to follow up. So
Not that part.
not that part.
Um, and then this slide, you all might already be familiar with this, but I just wanted to explain the requesting a COI process. It is this document that you see. It's a PDF that you'll fill out and then send directly to the certificates team at Willis Towers Watson. They're usually very quick at getting them back to you. So sometimes I know teams need a really quick turnaround, and they're great about that. But it's not something that USRowing has to be involved in. So you're able to get that over to them, and they're able to get that to you directly pretty quickly. Okay, so now we're gonna go into some questions that either are in the chat or were submitted. If you guys have more questions, and I say that because I know not everything can be talked about generally, like in a webinar format. A lot of things with insurance are super specific, so it's hard when we may not have all the context, or there's a unique circumstance with your club or your waterway or public entities and things like that. So I'll say that we'll try to answer as many and the best that we can. But if there's something you want to take offline or talk with me directly, that's my email, and I'm happy to kind of chat or have a call, set up another meeting, whatever it may be. I'm going to go through a couple questions that were submitted to us. One person had asked, for clubs operating in shared public facilities, how does US Rowing's liability coverage apply when incidents involve non-US Rowing public users? And that has happened. That's kind of what your coverage is for. The likelihood is that other entities, including public facilities, have their own coverage as well. But what to keep in mind is you're responsible for what you're liable for. So if an incident were to occur and your club was found liable, whether that's for, injuring someone in the public or property damage, it's going to be conducted in a full investigation. They're going to ask a lot of questions and try to find where the negligence was. Say there's a paddleboarder and your boat strikes them, something happens like that. The investigators are going to look at who was in the wrong, was the paddleboarder in the right areas that they were supposed to be in. But I guess what's key is just to remember that you're responsible for what you're liable for. The next question. Will the 2026 policy include updated guidance related to safe sport minors and public-facing practice environments? Are there recommended protocols clubs should adopt to ensure alignment? For something like this, what we're really going to point to is our other policies. So in terms of safe sport, we're looking at our abuse prevention and response policy. It's going to capture everything safeguarding in that measure, the safe sport code that clubs are to adhere to. It also includes the MAP, which is the minor athlete abuse prevention policy. That MAP is kind of what governs all one-on-one interactions. So that's going to be essentially what we're pointing to in terms of policy protocol, and organizations are agreeing to follow those policies. So I would encourage you to just be familiar with those and be implementing those, and that's kind of the best way to ensure alignment in that sense. In terms of
Real
go
quick,
ahead.
Alyssa, I just want to say too, that I think that's one of sometimes we think we're a more unusual sport and sometimes we actually are. And I think one of the best parts of our sport is that you do interact. I think it's great that when I was a young person at the head of the aquaquan, I got to see the masters rowers going, and I got to see, that we are able to be positive examples, and feel the excitement of watching those kids row is pretty awesome. That is not something we should be paranoid about. It's something we should simply follow the policy about. The purpose of safe sport is to, reduce and mitigate risk. It's not to prevent adults from ever being interacting with children, right? But there are pretty clear boundaries on that. But I think sometimes it's a good paranoia, but sometimes we can go a little too far. It's great when high school rowers see the masters rowers coming into their quad. That's okay to high five in the boathouse. These are all good things. Just make sure we're following the map.
Yeah. Another question was, does the insurance program address incidents involving coaching launches or equipment damages? Essentially, there's going to be coverage where there's liability tied to an incident. So again, that we don't have equipment or fleet coverage itself. Like those would be separate. It's going to be the liability of what the organization is responsible for. So that could look entirely different if a launch, just out at practice hits something in the water and is damaged. Like that's probably going to be more of an equipment coverage claim versus, when two boats collide and there's, a liable party involved. I guess that's what I would say to kind of answer that one.
Yeah, and that comes into play more often at regattas, where we have a mismatch between, driver of launch, which could be a referee, could be a volunteer acting on behalf as an agent of the regatta. And if there was to be a collision with a boat from another program, then there's liability on whoever is driving the launch. Therefore, it's more likely to be a situation where it could be involved. But just day-to-day practice, especially when I was a young coach, running into the four because I didn't slow down in time, that's without injury or fault. That's just equipment damage.
Mhm. One question came in that I will probably have WTW help answer. It's a great question, but they asked, what are the advantages of using USRowing's policy versus other market options? So Scott or Leah, if you want to touch on
Yeah,
that.
that's a very good question. What I would say is a couple things. One, it's a very bespoke policy with a lot of manuscripted wording that is specific to U.S. rowing and your operations and exposure. Just go back to the page where you included all the limits. The program that we have in place for the membership has $1 million of general liability plus a $5 million excess liability. So that's a significant amount of limits that in the open market is probably going to be quite expensive. So you get the benefit of the economies of scale of you being a participant in the program versus having to go out and buy it on your own. We have manuscripted language for who is a uninsured, which includes coaches, managers, trainers, volunteers. There is manuscripted language to carve back in coverage for rowboats and canoes. That includes paddle boards and things like that, kayaks and kind of non-motorized equipment. And we also cover motorized equipment, as we've already addressed and Tom addressed during practices and regattas. Again, language that has kind of stood the test of time, that has been built and crafted for the organization, that in the open market, you're going to have a challenge to get, or it's going to be quite expensive. The other one is the abuse and molestation coverage. You have a positive grant of coverage for that built into the policy. So with those types of things, it's a very robust policy as opposed to probably what you could get off the shelf in the open market.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick add to that too. We encountered that more than a few times. If you're an institutional organization, right? Like Tom Rooks University is going to tell me I can have a club program and we have insurance. The only thing I'd say as a lifelong program manager is look at your insurance, because we found several occasions that institutions will have things as severe as exemptions for all water activities. So yeah, we have a great policy, but it will not cover anything that happens on water. Those things are not uncommon. So I would just encourage you, trust your organization, do what's best for your organization, but also, for me as a coach or as a director, or, someone running something, be familiar with your insurance, because it stinks for everybody when we only learn about it post incident, right? When we learn, well, I would have liked that excess medical coverage because I do X, Y, and Z, and my health insurance would have covered me if I was a champ member versus basic, that kind of thing. So I'm always thankful when people come to webinars, because it means you are wanting more information. But I would just encourage you, if you're a program manager, head coach, just know what your insurance covers.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll keep moving. Someone had asked, can you explain the process of a regatta pass and the limits with that? So the limits in our regatta pass are the limits that we posted and discussed earlier. That all remains the same. You're essentially purchasing temporary membership, temporary coverage. You're only getting it for the regatta that you need it for. The system will prompt you to select the regatta that you're purchasing the pass for, and then it's automatically applied for the dates of the regatta. So whether it be a multi-day event or single-day event, that's what the coverage will apply to. All right, I'm switching over to the chat. Someone had asked that club members that are stubborn about buying their basic memberships, and are they covered? Good question. Coverage is extended to members in good standing. So, unfortunately, if something were to happen, like I mentioned earlier, the coverage is stemming from the organization. So if someone were to not have a membership or a signed waiver, and kind of be not in compliance, there is a chance that coverage would be denied in the case of an incident with them. So there's ways to track this and kind of try to manage it within the membership portal. We have some features on the dashboard that show like approaching non-compliance or non-compliant members. But essentially, yeah, just working with your team and roster management is kind of the best way to manage it, but understanding that, yeah, there might be friction there sometimes.
Yeah, and that's another one that I didn't do for years. And then now I realize, at least once a year, could just go through the roster and get rid of all those people that graduated or phased out of your club. One, it lets us know who's actually being covered and who's not, so we're not chasing down somebody who doesn't row anymore. But also, more importantly, when you trigger your renewal, it's based on your member roster. So if you're a club with 49 people, the threshold is 60, but you have another 100 that just haven't been cleared off your roster, then it's going to trigger a higher threshold for you. So this is a good time of year. I always liked winter to be the time I just sort of like archive people, and you can archive them so you still have all their information if you want, but they just can't be on your active roster if they're no longer part of your team, your club, your organization.
Um, Someone had asked, when does Learn to Row begin for insurance purposes? Does the 3-day rule include an introductory meeting, a session on the erg, sitting in the boat? Um, the 3 days is really going to be once they sign that waiver. The date of the waiver is going to be that first date. If they're involved with your club at all, even if it's on the erg, that would be when it's starting. You want them to sign a waiver before they're going to start participating in any way with your team. But that's kind of when that 3-day period is going to begin.
Yeah, and I saw a question adjacent to this as well. And the easiest way I'd say is if you're beginning rowing activities, right? It's not a meet the coaches night. It's once you begin rowing activities, you have liability for whoever's around your boathouse, right? So that would be if that's going to the erg room and they could have a medical incident, if that's slipping and falling, once they're engaged in those rowing activities, let's get a waiver signed. The difference between the 3-day and the 60 days. So we're going to do a learn to row event, and we're going to have a corporate learn to row event, and we're going to do that for a day. Great. Sign a waiver. Nobody needs to buy a membership. You know, we always welcome that because aren't we having fun here? But you don't have to buy a membership. We just need a waiver signed so we can cover the liability of that. When you have learn to row programs, and the reason we extended it to 60 days was really a response last year to a lot of scholastic and a lot of college coaches saying, look, 1 week into this, I don't know if there's, 3 days into it, we need to obviously make them a member, but these kids are paying $25 just to be a walk on that I then kick off the team in November because we had to make cuts, right? So we made that learn to row 60 days at half price to reduce that friction for people. And so, and a lot of teams utilized that last year. That was, I think, a successful program, which is part of why we're keeping it is let's not charge as much when we don't know the certainty the person will continue rowing. But
Mhm.
the 3-day thing is just so we have a waiver intact. We know that, we understand the risk we're taking engaging in rowing activities with somebody we don't know yet.
Mhm. Another question, does general rowing activities coverage extend to office and admin operations take place? Example is a non-boathouse training or office. Yes. If it is a club operations, if it is rented to you as the organization, this liability would be applicable there too. So we've seen teams sometimes work out at different locations. It's not physically their boathouse, but those are their, club rowing activities, and then the coverage is applicable there. Um, Someone asked, how often do we need to re-ask for a COI for an existing space or event? It would probably be per policy term, depending on if you're renting or doing something from another entity, but probably not a bad idea to have your proof of coverage annually, which the policy runs on a calendar year. So right about now, you could request one and just kind of have that on hand should you be asked by anyone or other entities that are asking that you have proof of coverage. Typically, they're asked or requested upon being asked to be added as an additional insured or something like that, but certainly annually is probably best practice.
And Alyssa, I'll add to that. They might be thinking of, on certain policies, just renewal certificates are automatically issued each year. And that can't be the case here. As before we issue them, we need to know and see your proof of membership for the next policy term. So if that's why it feels like you have to re-ask for the same thing each year, it's just that we need that proof of membership for this term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Someone asked that we have a number of volunteers for our hosted regatta that are not club members. Do they need to have USRowing supporter membership? No, they don't necessarily have to be. If they're a volunteer for your event and they don't necessarily need membership or desire membership for another reason, they're getting the coverage just by the event being sanctioned. It's the coverage applies to them. We have had incidents before with involving volunteers, so they are included on this without necessarily having the full membership as other members do.
And a good example of the cause for that membership is, we have, at a community rowing program, you might have a lawyer, that, if you can talk them into being on your board, you can get some good advice. Well, they don't row, they're not going to row, but we have to have board members be members of USRowing because of the code of conduct and the things implied with that. So support membership is designed around the scenarios where I'm definitely not a rower, I'm not going to be rowing, but I'm a part of this club. That's kind of the key point. But when we go into a regatta itself, to a sanctioned event, the COI includes volunteers as part of that.
I'm scrolling through here. Someone, and Scott and Lee, I might defer to you on the exact exclusion if there is one, but someone had asked that we have a dragon boat as part of our club as a 1 day a week programming for breast cancer survivors. Are they covered under this policy without being USRowing members?
They need to be a member of USRowing to have coverage. Yeah, if they're participating in a dragon boat race, paddle boat, rowboats, canoes. We've gotten dragon boats agreed to have coverage, not for racing and regatta purposes, but as an exposure if you have a dragon boat as a part of your club or facility. But if the idea is that event is taking place at your club, they need to be members of USRowing in order to have the coverage.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. The
If
language.
that's what the question is, I'm trying to understand.
No, I think you're right on it. It sounds like it's just part of the club operations, not necessarily a competition. I know the
The
policy.
competitions would not be covered. If it's a
Yeah.
part of your operations, it would be covered. But the people participating and rowing in that boat need to be members of USRowing.
It's things that non-members of your organization are doing day to day are not part of rowing activities.
Correct.
We do though see, like, there are teams in Texas. There's plenty of places that either rent equipment for use or store other people's equipment, and there's plenty of third-party providers for that. But
Correct.
our plan doesn't cover the full range of what that could mean.
Right.
Like, I wish I had a massage studio at the boathouse, but that's not something we would be able to cover with non-members. So it's so your solution there is either have them become members, and then that dragon boat as part of your day-to-day operations is covered, or to have it be a completely separate entity from your organization.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Which that also happens. There's a lot of rowing clubs nowadays that have some dragon boats around, but it's their own organization with their own insurance, not connected to the rowing activities of the place it's at.
Right. Hopefully that answered that for you, Austin, but we can take that offline if needed. Someone had just asked if the slides will be available and distributed. Yes, this is being recorded as well, so we'll get that shared along with the slide deck as well. Someone also mentioned the health benefit again. We don't have a lot of information to share right now, just that is being worked on very quickly on the back end to try and get that going. Very broadly speaking, it will be kind of comprehensive health options for individuals of US Rowing, and then opportunities for clubs to be able to offer group benefits to their employees as well. So I know that's not a lot of details yet, but we're working through all of that, and we are very excited to be able to share that when it's time.
Yeah, a big push for that comes from our membership as well. Just, we know that there are not enough coaches for the amount of people that want to row. Simple as that, right? And that sometimes it's hard to view coaching as a profession. So being able to offer benefits to members, coaches, referees, people in the sport, it's going to be a complete third-party operation that we don't have any sort of financial connection to, but it's just an offering we can do because we have a large member database. So if it's good for people, great. And if it isn't, that's okay. But we'll have more details about that in January.
Yes, we might have time for one or two more. I'm trying to read through. Someone had asked if a club does not hold organizational membership, can individuals still compete at US Rowing sanctioned events as long as each individual in the boat has championship membership? Yes, if I'm understanding the question correctly, yes, that's exactly what like that unaffiliated entry would be under. So if an organization dissolves or is no longer participating, whatever it may be, individuals can still interact and participate in US rowing events because that coverage stems from the organization. That's just where they would be required to have the champ membership and then compete unaffiliated. Someone had asked if coaches, it's a good question, if coaches have to be L1 certified to get coverage. I would say for this, we know that there's a variety of clubs out there or coaches out there, whether they're certified L1, L2, L3, or just volunteer coaches. The policy is applicable to organizations that purchase it and the members in good standing. So that's a little bit of maybe a more of a compliance question to learning and development, but organizations are required to have certified coaches, but the coverage is being received by members in good standing. So active membership, waiver, and safe sport if applicable. Those are going to be the key components.
Yeah, issues of that.
It just says coaches.
And it's important too, just to put this here, that we want safety boats, right? So there are plenty of clubs that have parents that have a boating license and enough training to rescue somebody. And if you want to maximize the safety of your club by having more boats involved in safety, fantastic. Coaching compliance is an L&D issue, and it's sort of whether or not your membership itself is in good standing. If I, as a program director, say this is my head coach, and the head coach says I don't comply with US rowing policies, that's a different issue than an insurance issue. So to answer your question, I think no, as it regards insurance, but that doesn't mean that's compliance with your membership.
Mm-hmm.
Hope that made sense. And I encourage you to have safety boats. Like, do it. I come from a place with a lot of Coast Guard people. Those parents love to be safety boat drivers. The more the better. The more safety boats out there, the less risk we have, which is good for everybody.
All right. I'm not seeing anything else like roll in at the moment. And we're getting close to the hour. So what I will say just to close it out is that my email is there. So if something wasn't answered or you didn't get the full answer, just sometimes it's hard to speak broad, or if we don't quite have all the context. So that's the only thing I'll add. If you feel like something wasn't covered, shoot me an email and then I'll get connected, or Tom or I will get connected with you after that.
And if we missed your question, I think there were like 30 plus of them, because it was an hour thing. We are going to follow up. We've written them all down. So the team will follow up with you if we didn't get to your question. It's a topic that wasn't covered. We'll definitely get with you. I'd say give it a couple days. Tomorrow's Thursday. Probably by close of Monday, I'm imagining. So, and if that doesn't work, call me. I don't have any missed calls on my phone.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone that took the time to join tonight. I hope you all have happy holidays, and we look forward to seeing you in 2026.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Thanks,
Alyssa.
everybody.